Hey, Oseo, everybody. My name is Jacob Klanky. I am a fourth year student at Grand Valley State University studying anthropology with a minor in art history. I also happen to be the president of our Native American Student Association over there. I'm from Muskegon, Michigan, but I currently live off campus in Grand Rapids. I am a descendant of the Crow and Cherokee Nations.
Buju Gekinoo'imaagejig, Jennifer Niemi, Indigenikaag, Magazine Indudem, Gaa Waabaabiganikaag, Dunjaba, Idash, Two Harbors, Minnesota, and Da. I'm here, I guess, as two roles. I'm the Director of Native Studies at the College of St. Scholastica. And I also am a doctoral student, which I never really thought I'd be here, but once I started the path. So I'm excited to be with you all today.
Hi, my name is Timothy Lilya. I'm a proud member of Boys for Band at Chippewa, and I'm an incoming freshman at UMD this year.
Buju everyone, Beijigo Nodin Quain Indigenikaag, Magazine Indodem, Gichiname Benizibing, Nindonjaba, Misquabe Congo Jibwe Quain and Dao. Hi, my name is Roxy Sprowl. I am a proud citizen of the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe. I'm originally from Marquette, Michigan, but I'm currently in East Lansing because I attend school at Michigan State University. I'm a junior and I'll be majoring in social work and minoring in Indigenous studies and race and ethnicity in the United States.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Kristen Lilya. I'm one of the producers for Native Bidaské, and we are doing a special edition this week. So our first question for everybody is, tell us about your experience getting into college.
For me, my experience getting into college, I wasn't really all that prepared for it. I kind of decided early on that I was just going to go to a place that felt familiar with me. However, it was a place that I still knew that I felt I would fit in. You know, something that was important to me was that the school I was going to had a NASA or a NASO that I could participate in. But honestly, I really didn't get like that sense of guidance and kind of helping me decide where I was going. When I went in, it kind of felt like I was doing it on my own. Once I was there and I kind of found my footing within the NASA and the other organizations that I was a part of and getting help on campus, I think it got a little bit easier. I felt a little more comfortable doing what I was doing. If I could do it all over again, I probably wouldn't have skipped out on things like orientation. It might have been a good thing to go to, but I found help on campus, so it's been a little rocky, but I've done it, and it's been overall, I think, a good experience.
Awesome. Yes. And Jennifer?
Yeah, so this is the running joke in my family that I only started college because I didn't have anything to do during the day and all my friends were going to school. So I didn't know it would lead me to finally getting my doctorate. But once I kind of got in that groove, Timothy, I was a UMD, I was a dog for my undergrad and was very involved in the club. And so, yeah, I just felt once I started the ball rolling, I'm a first gen college student. I don't know who else here by nod of heads are first gen college students. And that's a lot when you don't know how to navigate situations. So Native Studies, the programs I found, the community I found really kind of helped guide me through that process. So yeah, and now at my age, I'm getting a doctorate, so.
Well, thank you for joining us. Timothy, your experience getting into college is very fresh. What was that like for you?
My parents always made it a priority for me and my siblings to go to college. And after the Native American tuition waiver was passed by all the U of M schools, I kind of took it as my chance to kind of further my education and, graduate from a good school.
Sounds good. Thank you, Timothy. And Roxy, can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
So for me, it was mostly self-directed. I had pretty minimal help from anyone, like in terms of deciding what schools to apply to, and like navigating scholarships. I had some faculty at my high school like send me different scholarships that were happening, and I applied for them. And in the Upper Peninsula and in the state of Wyoming through Michigan State University, there's a scholarship called the STAR Scholarship, which is a donor-based scholarship, and it's only for UP students and students from Wyoming, and it's a full ride for 4 years. And so in Marquette, where I'm from, that was a really big deal. Like everyone would apply for it, even if they weren't planning on going to Michigan State. And so I was like, I'm just going to apply. One of the other reasons why I decided to go to Michigan State, and also something that helped me through like the process of applying to schools, was I'm going into a career of social work. And one of the things that I always heard from social workers growing up was that they went to Michigan State. And so I was like, this seems like a pretty reputable social work program. So one thing that I didn't do is look into different varieties of programs when I was applying. So I went headstrong into all my applications being like, I'm studying social work, which as a junior now, I love the fact that I'm a social work student. I just got into the School of Social Work here. But I wish I took time to explore other opportunities at other universities. But yeah, I didn't have any really difficulty like getting into school either. The schools I applied to, I got into, so I'm really grateful that for that and the fact that I did have other options. But I wish I had more help. Everything was pretty much self-directed, besides asking for letters of recommendation, and people being like, "Hey, you should apply for this scholarship." I also had no idea that the Michigan Indian tuition waiver was a thing until like 3 months into me applying for college. And that was like eye-opening for me. And that was like very helpful learning about that. But yeah, and then during that process as well, I remember I did get a call from the Native American admissions counselor for Michigan State, and she called me personally on my phone number to be like, hey, if you need any help with anything, like let me know. And I thought that was really awesome. And that was another reason why I wanted to go to Michigan State, because I like was reached out to in that way and it felt more personable. So yeah, that's pretty much my experience. I really wish I learned about the Michigan Indian tuition waiver way sooner, but yeah, I wish that was advertised more. Where I'm from, most people don't go out of like the Marquette community to go to school. Most people go to Northern Michigan University, so most people are familiar with Northern and not really familiar with any other universities. So I think that's also a reason why like there was a little bit of lack of support there. But yeah, that was my experience.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing those experiences with us. This question goes along with the first question, but why did you decide to further your education?
So I decided to further my education, I think, because, from a young age, I did have parents who did impose upon me the importance of education and getting an education and getting a secondary education. So I had that expectation, and not everybody does. I don't think everybody has to get a secondary education. But I do think that it is a worthy pursuit if it is something that you're interested in, and there's a lot that you can do with it and a lot that it has to offer. I've learned so much more than I ever really could have imagined or thought that I would be learning about. I don't know if it's all relevant, but most of it is interesting, at least a little bit. But I also had the desire choosing this particular university in the sense that I knew it had, like I said, a NASA that I could participate in. That sense of community was important to me, and I wasn't interested in going someplace that didn't have that to offer. And, I also did have passions that I wanted to pursue and develop, and the opportunities that I have gotten through college, like being able to work with the Grand Rapids Public Museum on their Native programming is something that I never could have imagined would have been, given to me.
Yeah, for me growing up, so I'm a little bit older than all of you. So my grandpa was the last one to go through boarding school. And so there was this whole weird disconnect. And it wasn't really until I was 12 that I kind of met his side of the family. And always knowing I was Native, but never knowing enough like where to turn or ask questions. And for me, university really, like the Natives program really in the club really helped me to cultivate that. And as a director of a program now, I think a lot of students come in with that unknowing, there's historical trauma, there's a lot. And so I think this kind of sometimes a university setting is a place to start to cultivate like who you are as a human. And so for me, growing up, I had these connections, but I didn't really have the connections. And so it was through my university process that I was able to really kind of make that. And so for part of me, getting a degree, a bachelor's in Native studies felt kind of like, well, I know this, right? Like and then you're like, oh, I don't know that at all. And so it was really great. And so I hope, I see a lot of students that come in that are, confused, disconnected, and trying to find that connection. And so that to me kind of spurred, I guess, the path that I'm on in my work, but also students through this work as well as myself.
Like I said, my parents always made it a priority for me and my siblings to go to college, and I just thought that gave me the best chance to succeed after school, just to graduate from college and to get a decent job to make a living for myself.
So my big reasoning is very simple. I wanted to get out of my hometown so badly. I didn't care what I was doing. I wanted to get out. My secondary answer would be the fact that I wanted to be a social worker ever since I was young, and you needed like a bachelor's degree at minimum in order to do that. So that's mostly why. Not many of my family members, my parents haven't gone to college, so my grandparents haven't gone to college either. So it was definitely like a little different and more difficult to navigate. But yeah, I wanted to get out of my hometown and I wanted to become a social worker.
So going to college for a lot of people is a very jarring experience, and for some people, they're moving away from their, communities, or they're moving off from the reservation, and they're struggling to find ways to stay connected to their culture. And for other people, going to college is kind of a catalyst for them to be more connected to their culture. So are you, as a student at your respective university, able to perform cultural practices in the dorms, like smudging or tobacco use? And why or why not? And then do you, if you are able?
So at Michigan State, you can, but you have to submit a form and have it approved, I think like a few days before you use tobacco at least. I'm not exactly sure what the smudging policy is, but I know that that's the policy for tobacco. When I lived in the dorms, I don't live in the dorms now. I lived in the dorms during COVID. I got an approval to live on campus when no one else was there, and I got my dorm all to myself. So I was growing a sema in my dorm. No one could really stop me. So that's what I did, which might not, be the rules. But I was going to practice my culture no matter what. And I think COVID also was kind of like a peak for me to like really delve into like who I am and like my community and stuff. And so I wasn't going to let that stop me. But now that more people are on campus, I know it's become more of an issue. But yeah, our faculty, our Indigenous faculty worked really hard in order to get that policy approved. kind of relating to like what you were saying at first, Neely, being on campus and at MSU at a predominantly white institution has been very difficult compared to life in the Upper Peninsula. There was a lot of community connections there, and there was always something cultural going on. Whereas I feel like in Lansing, there isn't much of that, and not as much of it, at least, because it's more of an urban area down here. So that has been very hard, I will say. And our program at Michigan State University and our number of Native students is going down. So connecting with like student Native community is also very difficult. I am the co-chair of NASO, the North American Indigenous Student Organization at MSU. So I do connect with as many Native students as I can, but it is still really difficult. But yeah, I don't really let like university rules stop me from partaking in my culture, because this is a land grant institution as well. I'm gonna participate in my culture here no matter what. But yeah, Neely and I even danced all around campus one day, like in our regalia and stuff. And I don't know, it's kind of freeing doing stuff like that too. So yeah.
And Timothy, I know you haven't been to college yet, but do you know anything about the policies about smudging or tobacco use at UMD?
Currently, I don't, because honestly, I don't know too much about that type of subject, but I don't know the policy or anything on it in the dorms or apartments. But I think that if it is allowed, then colleges should let their students know about the policy if they're all right with it or not.
And do you have plans to, stay connected to your culture while you're at college?
I'd be open to practicing that kind of stuff, as long as everybody else in my apartment and everything was okay with it. But yeah, it would be something it's something I'd be open to trying and, teaching myself about, I guess.
Sounds good. And Jennifer?
Yeah, so that was one of the first things when I started my position at CSS that we changed, is the smudging policy was buried in the no smoking. And I'm like, that's not where it belongs. Like, one, this is a cultural, like, we have Freedom of Religious Act. Like, and so we reframe the policy. So students, they literally have to fill out a form just so we know, and we can let, certain people, RAs, know. And then we have a little sign they can put on their dorm. So if you're smelling anything, this is what's happening. But I was surprised how well the institution took it. We're a private Catholic college. So I talked about burning candles, and how just the cultural significance. And so the campus was really good about changing that policy right away. And so we, at our RA trainings in the past, I don't know if they've done it during COVID, but the police department would come in and they would do a controlled burn, because you hear it and everybody's like, somebody's smoking, because and they don't know the difference. And so the police department would come in and do a controlled burn of marijuana, and then we'd come in and do a controlled burn of sage, so the RAs knew the difference. And so there's just a couple things we've done that way. Just this last year, we started a Ojibwe medicine garden on campus in collaboration with the sisters. And so, so we're trying to make it more just embedded within the culture of the community, more than anything. And so, our NASA club is really involved on campus and doing different things. We have a drum, Ogadeke Benes, so we're charged with feasting him seasonally. So Timothy, I'll get your email from your sister. I'll invite you to come up the hill for feast. It's on Indigenous Peoples Day, so October 10th. So we feast. So I feel like there's opportunities where students don't feel, and then we have our club, our space, and students are free to smudge there without everybody knows that. And so it's just when we get in those areas where, it might be sensitive smoke systems that we have to notify anyone. But otherwise, yeah, it's open on campus, and that just feels really good.
I personally have never lived on the dorm, so I can't speak personally about what the dorm smudging policy is. I will say I do think that the rules in place, I don't know if the RAs and the staff people at the university are intentional enough to even look at them. So I think if we have any, I'm not sure anybody is being aware, because we do smudge in rooms in buildings when we do have NASA meetings and when we have cultural events on campus. Most of the time, we never have had a problem. Every now and again, we will get a campus employee who probably doesn't know anything about the policy on, smudge, doesn't know anything about the laws surrounding it, who come in and wonder what's going on. And, we remind them that we have a legal right to do this. This was an act passed in 1978. And that is what I tell students if they are going to smudge in their room and they get any flack for it. Most of the time, nothing happens. I think something to circumvent that is we have asked repeatedly for spaces on campus where we can meet regularly, that it's our space where we can do that, and we know we can do that, and we don't have to worry about faculty or smoke detectors, because that is something that is a concern. Luckily, we've never had any issue, but for now, I think it's an okay policy, but it has lots and lots of room to grow.
Awesome. Thank you guys for opening up and sharing your answers to that question. Our next question is, what kind of resources does your school provide for Native students?
Okay, so the first one, I guess, is the North American Indigenous Student Organization, NASO. That's open to anyone, not just North American Indigenous people. So that's number one. That's a student organization on campus. There is the Native American Admissions Counselor, like I mentioned earlier. There is the Native American Institute, which I believe is related to the Law College. And there's the American Indian and Indigenous Studies minor. And there's a graduate certificate, but yeah, that's all I can really think of when it comes to resources on campus. And with that, I'll say they're all depleting. We don't have a director for the Indigenous Studies program currently. We don't have a director for the Native American Institute. Or if we do, they recently just left, or they're in the middle of a director change. We do have a tribal law program. Matthew Fletcher is the head of the tribal law program. But yeah, and then we just got a new director for the NASO. And yeah, so a lot of things are kind of rocky right now at MSU when it comes to Native resources for students. That's pretty much all I can think of. I don't know if Neely can think of any, but that's all I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, me and Roxy are both the co-chairs for NASO. So I like to consider myself like a huge resource for Native students on campus, and I'm sure Roxy as well, because we are co-chairs for NASO. So we are really focused on creating that space and being that resource for Native students, because Roxy said, those resources are very much depleting. So yeah, I would consider me and Roxy both resources as well.
That's awesome. I love seeing young Native leaders. Timothy, we know you're new to the college experience, but do you know of any resources at UMD?
When I went to orientation in the middle of July to UMD, I met with a lady who was in charge of the American Indian Resource Center, Judy O'Connor, and she kind of filled me on the type of resources that American Indian students have at UMD. And I don't know of any more at the moment, but I'm hoping to learn of more centers like that for Native American students.
Awesome. Awesome. Just so everybody knows, I actually went to CSS, so I have my own personal experiences about the resources at CSS, but Jennifer, I'll let you take the floor and kind of explain those resources.
Yeah, well, one, I'd love to talk to you because I think you graduated before I probably came into this role. And so I'd love to hear, I love to hear past stories. So we have the Jiman Abiwin Room, which is a native, it's in Tower Hall. If you know Scholastica, it's like the big castle. And it's for our native students to just hang out, do homework. There's computers there and resources. We have a little kitchenette. And our NASA club, Native American Student Alliance, does a lot of activities. There are meetings there every month. We try to do a lot there, but we also try to get to the Intercultural Center because that's kind of a big hub that people walk by and can see. And so a few things we do just for students is we have a monthly beading night where faculty, staff, and students can get together, which is kind of cool to just see people, not in those different hierarchical roles, but to get together and do an activity and to learn about the history of the pattern. We do have a scholarship for Native students on campus. And I know a private Catholic college seems like, oh, that's too much, but don't let the sticker price deter you. I mean, I think we're on par with a lot of the state, like the MNHS system, as far as what people pay for tuition. It's a small school, so you don't get lost in the shuffle. I can rattle off my UMD, my student ID like that. And that's how I think how a lot of people knew me. But in our small community, we kind of, our Native community on campus, we find each other, right? We have and I'm connected in my role with our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office. And so we do a lot of different programming collaboratively through that office. NASA is part of several social justice clubs on campus. So we try to do some different collaborations. So this last spring, we brought in 2 comedians. One was the Res Reporter, if you know who Rob Fairbanks is. He's from Leech Lake. He's hilarious. So we brought him to campus to do a show. It was awesome. Our campus officially 2 years ago started recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day. And so we put together a list of resources so faculty, staff, students are aware of just around the history of that day, but also different events they can do throughout that time. As I mentioned, we feast our drum seasonally. We usually open it to the community fall and spring because no one's ever around over the holidays or in the summer on those breaks. So we do a little bit smaller stuff. We also have programmings. One, I lovingly call it Native 101, but it's kind of like 500 years of history to kind of let people know, like, since Doctrine of Discovery, where we are today and how we got here. And I think when people start learning that, they're like, oh, okay. And also, too, the sisters have been really great. We're working on, a land acknowledgement, but the question has always been impact versus intent of doing something like that and making sure, like, if we're going to do this, that we can see how that filters out to the rest of our campus community. So it really has roots in the area. So those are just kind of a few things that we have for students on campus.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Jennifer. Jacob?
So as the president of NASA, I of course see myself as, somebody that the students can come to if they need anything. Oftentimes that involves me putting them in touch with other people. But, because I have been at the university for 4 years, especially for incoming students, I know a lot more than they do. Of course, I believe that a lot of people know a lot more than I do, but that's why I put them in touch. Also, I will say that our university has been growing a lot in the past couple of years with our programming and what we had to provide for Native students. That in large part is due to Lynn Bardwell in our Office of Multicultural Affairs. Her position title is technically program coordinator, but I also consider her to be like a Native student liaison. She single-handedly has introduced a wealth of community activities for us students. I mean, every single month we have at least one event that is a community-centered event that we can go out and do. She turned Native American Heritage Month at the university into Native American Heritage Celebration. So now it can last the entire semester, and it, allows us to gather a lot more often. And I think because of that, we have a much greater sense of community now than when I first started and we weren't doing that type of stuff. We also now, for the second year, have had our Native American student orientation, Mashra, and that has been working really wonderfully. Of course, we're a really small group of students, as people would expect, but I think in some ways that really works to our advantage because we can connect a lot more personally with the students. And I see our numbers growing, from this year to last year. And even though it's small, I think it's a positive impact. And I think any, rate of growth is positive in this community because it's really hard to be in school and to get an education and to also be an adult. So, of course, on campus, we try to incentivize students to stay with us and stay in the community because I really do think that that helps us be better students when it feels like we're not as alone. So, we also have Minochi Gaywan, which is our Native Student Success Program, which has activities every month as well, which meets for an hour and a half. And Lynn Bardwell is, of course, the coordinator for that as well. And recently on campus, we just finished constructing a fully operational teaching lodge on our sustainable agriculture project that is going to be intended for community purposes and use. It was actually first used it was used for the first time just a couple of days ago during our Native student orientation. We had Shannon Martin come out there and give a teaching and share some knowledge. So I'm really hopeful for the opportunities that can provide in the future with internships. There's also a garden and a fire pit out there. So we're really planning on having that be a space where not just the campus community can gather, but also the greater Grand Rapids community.
Thank you for sharing. And many universities, and to my knowledge, the universities that you all are attending are predominantly white institutions, meaning that all of us constitute one of the smallest populations on campus. And so the next question is, have you found yourself walking, in two different worlds?
So I came into college, I think, like a lot of students, I was really seeking that sense of community because that wasn't something I was getting where I was at. I grew up in a suburb of Muskegon. I came from a predominantly white school to a predominantly white university. And, I think Grand Valley will say that they have, a lot of diversity and inclusion, and I do think that is improving and getting better, but it's still a predominantly white university with predominantly white faculty and staff in a rural area. So, it can be really uncomfortable at times. And because we're a mid-sized university, we have a decent number of people, but as Native people, we're still a small population on campus no matter what. It's just kind of going to be the reality unless you're going to a tribal college. Because of that, in the position that I am as somebody who does put themselves out there, as a president of NASA, it's very easy to get stretched very, very thin to where I'm being the student and I'm also being the teacher, yet I'm not being compensated for my time. No relationships are being built. It just feels like I'm being taken advantage of for an identity that often isn't even seen by the faculty and the staff and the students at this university. I have had issues with faculty and staff. I've had issues with certain courses that I have taken that have been centered on Native topics. And that has been something that's been difficult to discuss because you always fear, am I going to be listened to? Am I going to be seen? Are they going to be respectful? Because a lot of people don't even know how to talk to Indigenous students, even if they claim it to be, their area of expertise. And that's why I'm so grateful that we have, a small handful of Native faculty and staff like Lynn Bardwell and like people like Dr. Andrea Viley-Melkovitz, who was the director for that Teaching Lodge project. They are our best advocates on campus, because if no one's willing to listen to us, then they're more likely to listen to them. So being in touch with them on campus has helped made some of the issues that surround being a person of color on campus. They make it a little bit better, but it doesn't go away. And they know that. And that's why it's nice to have that sense of community on campus. But because there's so few of us, all of us feel that weight of being stretched so thin. One of our Indigenous professors is on sabbatical this upcoming year. And with that goes our best class that is teaching Native topics. When she comes back, that class will be there, but that's a year that information is not being shared, and people are, going to continue to spread this ignorance that otherwise could be combated. And it's unfortunate, but that's the reality of the situation. I think we're often forced to feel grateful for what we can get, and I am grateful, but I also want more.
Yeah, I love that so much, wanting more. And I always tell the students when I'm in that role and not a student myself, like the two hats there, that you are the reason things happen on this campus. And so just to remind them their power in that space and place. I think we feel like sometimes we're under we have to do it, we just have to do. But when student voice is out there, I think that's huge. My own college experience, definitely walking into worlds. I had this naivety that education equaled cultural competence. And I found out very quickly once I went to a bigger school that was not the case. Professors would say things and I would just be like, that just, who do what? And so I've, it's taken a long time. I'm now, in a doc program, and I feel more confident to call people in when they say things in a good way. But I also, it's really hard. And I think some of our students that come from more rural communities that come to a campus or a town like Duluth, and it just feels so overwhelming. And so trying to make them find their space and place. And that's why, my classes, I always bring them to the Chimon room to be like, we're going to hang out here for a bit. And so people can feel comfortable in that space and to start to find community. I'm also, I don't know, this is probably not a good thing, but I'm also like, just you text or call if you have any problems,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's my auntiness shining through, but I want our students to feel seen and supported. And if they don't, I want them to feel confident to come and vocalize that to me or others in our team so we can help push that forward or guide them in that process.
So, Timothy, you are coming up and about ready to start your first year. Is, struggling with your identity and struggling, being a Native person on a white campus, is that something you're concerned about for this next year?
I guess I was sort of walking in two worlds because I did have friend groups that were mostly Native American and some that weren't. And I always thought that there were steps to be made in order to kind of break that social barrier between Native American students and non-Native American students, and kind of just acknowledging each kind of social group as like their own sort of respectful group and not to be separated or segregated in that kind of way.
I would say that my experience is very similar to Jacob's experience. Jacob and I have actually talked about some of this stuff before. But yeah, I would say that I definitely have to walk between two worlds. When I'm on campus and at university, but I think I've had to do that my whole life. Being from a predominantly white area, which is Marquette, where the main population was like 96% white and then 2% Native, the second highest group, most populated racial group. Yeah, I've had to experience it my whole life, but I think I experience it a little bit more now, especially now that I'm away from like my family. My aunt was the Native American education coordinator for my school district growing up, and so I always had her, and I always had my family with that and my community, but I don't have much of that here. So it's definitely challenging. And I have very similar experience to Jacob when it comes to, and with Jennifer when it came to college classes. I've had college professors just say some stuff that I absolutely was completely offended by. Or was just completely incorrect. I've had students ask me similar things. And that's pretty hard because like Jennifer was saying earlier, like you go into like this like secondary education thinking that you're gonna be like met with more cultural competency when like for me I think it was like a little bit less. It's like a more like educated racism, if that makes sense. That's kind of how it feels. Like I grew up in an area that was blatantly racist and ignorant, but it's this like fake, like I guess masked ignorance at universities that makes it more difficult here. Because oftentimes it can seem like it's a very accepting place or they advertise themselves to be an accepting place. But when you go to take a class about your history, it's not accurate or it's, you know what I mean? So yeah, I've definitely had to walk between two worlds. But I think over the past like year and a half, I've grown a lot as a person and in my identity. And so I'm very confident in my identity. And I don't really like cower down to people anymore like I used to. And yeah, I always prioritize my indigeneity in everything that I do. So I don't think that'll ever stop. And so when things do arise, I mean, like I'm gonna prioritize who I am in my community first. So it's definitely gotten a little bit easier going through college to navigate that part of it. But yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I know that was kind of a tough question, but thank you all for sharing your experiences with that. Our last question is, do you have any advice for other Native students thinking about going to college?
I think that my main takeaway from college, what I would have to say, especially to the students that just had Native student orientation, we're talking about what they can expect from college, because I know people know that it's hard. I know people know that it's different, but I just don't think people know how maybe exhausting it can be and how much your personal life can be sacrificed because of that. And something that I always want to remind the students, as somebody who does see myself as somebody who I hope they can go to, is that even though college can be really hard and you're likely to be pulled into a lot of directions, that most likely will lead you further from community. No matter where you are on this journey of your indigeneity and your identity, that there is community on campus and there's community at home who are waiting for you and who will welcome you when you decide to join, however often that is. Because especially on campus, we understand that it is difficult and we understand, the trials and tribulations of being in school, being Indigenous, and trying to be an adult. It's really hard. We are there when you're ready for us.
As a non-traditional student, I just don't stop. I always tell people, don't let anyone dim your light. Just follow your path. And sometimes there's a lot of muck we have to get through. But we're made for that, right? That's been our story. We're doing it. And so don't let anyone tell you you can't, or you shouldn't, or you're not able. Find your resources, find your people, even if it's one connection you make. You got this. And so, like I said, as I'm entering I didn't tell anyone until I made it through my first year of doc school. And I'm like, okay, now I feel like I can tell people. But that was my own insecurity in the process. But yeah, don't let anyone, it doesn't matter. Just don't let anyone drag you down. We're not crabs in the bucket. We're here to support each other. And I think there's strength in community. And so finding that community is super important. So that's my advice.
If I had any advice to give, I would kind of talk to them about what they want to do after school and what kind of schooling they need to accomplish their goals. Because I kind of feel like college is becoming more and more necessary in order to succeed in life. So I would just kind of sort of make a pros and cons of going to college and sort of a need/wants list of what you want to do and what you need to do in order to accomplish those goals. And ask anybody for advice, or just talk to somebody about it who knows more about the subject than you, and maybe they'll kind of help you find the answer that you were looking for.
I think I'll have to echo basically everything that everyone else was saying. Yeah, I really liked what Jennifer said. Don't let anyone dim your light. Especially during the college application process. Rejection can be hard for a lot of students. So don't let that dim your desire to go to college. Don't let that set you back. There are so many colleges and universities out there. Just take that as a sign, or try to appeal it. If you really want to go there are processes that can get you there. Yeah, and I would say reach out to your school, reach out to teachers, even if you're not super close with them. Be like, hey, I'm really confused with the process of how to apply for college. Can you please help me? And I'm sure you'll find at least one person who would be willing to help you in some way. Yeah, and then kind of more specific, I would say reach out to whatever university or college that you're applying to. Reach out to their Indigenous student organization, find out what they're called, find them on social media. That's what I did. Find them on social media and reach out to them and ask, what is the community like here? How are you treated at this university as an Indigenous student? And what are things that are happening in your student organization and the Native student community on campus? Because if I would have known that information, I would have had a more well-rounded view on which college to go to. So that's definitely something that I wish I would have done more to more universities. Don't be afraid to message people on social media, especially if they're tied to a student organization, an Indigenous student organization. Most of us are so eager to talk to you. And our DMs and our messages and all of that are always open for anyone who's questioning college or needing college advice. Yeah, and then also look and see if there's any sort of tuition waivers, or if you qualify for any tuition waivers, or if your college or university that you would like to go to has any sort of financial aid available. And see if there's any Native focused scholarships as well. That's one of my huge tips for that. But yeah, don't let anyone dim your light, and don't let professors tell you what your culture is either, or faculty. Don't let anyone tell you who you are and what your identity is, because you know who you are at the end of the day, and so does your community, or they will know who you are if you're reconnecting. So that's probably all of my advice. But yeah, I would say also it's okay to do a pros and cons list of every university you apply to as well. Bring it back old school, like like honestly. But yeah, so that's all of my advice.
I want to thank you all for sharing such great advice. A lot of times college is very, mystified for a lot of Native students, and especially first gen students. So I think this roundtable was a great start in demystifying the process and demystifying the experience of Indigenous students at universities. So thank you all for joining us today.
Is there any last remarks that you guys wanted to say before we stop recording?
I think I have one more thing to say.
I feel like Roxy and I could go back and forth.
Oh, true.
And with Jennifer too, it could be hours, everybody. But if one real quick thing, and I think this is something that all of us have touched upon when we're talking about our long-term college experiences. A lot of it does feel like you do have to do it on your own, and I do think a lot of the initiation is doing it on your own. It's finding a contact and staying in touch with that contact, bringing your issues to that contact. I think as long as you find, that one person on campus who's willing to help you, for us on GVSU, that's our Indigenous faculty and staff, we have to reach out to them to get their help, but they are always more than willing to help. And I know reaching out seems scary, but it's really important. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, I totally agree. The thing that I was going to say is more of just like, I guess kind of like answering the in between two worlds thing, but also kind of advice. It's more of just like a warning, because I wish I had known this as well. For students who are advice and slash, like, I don't know, for like incoming students or people who are interested in applying for college. The bottom line is that the academy is against you for the most part as a Native student and as a Native person. But there are ways to work around that. And that's what you need to figure out. And that's where community comes in. Because academia was not founded on supporting and uplifting Native people. It was founded on the opposite. And so a lot of the time, if you do attend university, or if you're thinking about attending university, this is just something to keep in the back of your mind, kind of like prepare yourself for. It can be very challenging because of that sole fact that universities were not founded to support us and our knowledge systems and anything like that. But when you do find community on campus and community within the university, it changes. It makes it a little bit easier because you all are in it together. And like, as cheesy as that sounds, you're all in it together when it comes to protecting your own like ancestral knowledge systems and protecting your own history as an Indigenous person, and I don't know, it's not necessarily like fighting back the academy, but it kind of is in a way. The fact that you are attending university, or even the fact that you're thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess that's the last thing that I wanted to say, but yeah.
So my only thing is, Timothy, you got this.
I hope so.
You can always come visit us over the hill.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
He sounds kind of nervous about that, going